Yo, what's up? Welcome to the stream. Today's topic is defense. Thank you all for showing up. I'm not going to waste anyone's time, so I'm going to jump straight to it. Right here I have my All Might deck. This was featured in a video on my YouTube channel, and the deck is very aggressive and has defense tools, but not as much as my other decks that I would like. And in fact, there's another weakness to this deck that I don't think is a weakness, but it is a weakness that could be exploited. And what that weakness is this deck only has 4 low blocks. But the thing about low blocks is there's not many decks that play low blocks, and the ones that do, I don't believe that you'll run into them. And I think that maximizing your offense with this deck in particular is what can get you there, and it's your game plan. So my plan with this deck, and it may work, may not work, because this is still theory crafting and still hasn't had its run of, you know, what can you do with the deck and how to optimize it. And I'm thinking you put your low blocks into the sideboard, because decks with generally 10, 8 low blocks, they generally run very fine in tournament play. From what I've seen, you know, you don't want to have too many low blocks, because if you have too many low blocks and your opponent's playing like a bunch of highs, which is generally the case, it's gonna not be a fun time, because you won't be able to block and you'll take a bunch of damage, and that's not what you want. It isn't. And there are 3 different types of decks in the game, and I kind of want to show that off right here. Is you have deck builds that are offensive. So for example, this All Might, I would consider this a very offensive build. And then we have characters like Eraserhead, which is, in my opinion, all defense, because he has access to speed. He has the ability to pick up a mid block every he gets to filter out his whole hand. So if you have lows and highs in Eraserhead has the ability to change any of those to mid blocks. So when you're deck building for Eraserhead, you want to have more highs and lows instead of mids. That way, you know, if you ever draw into a high block, a low block, and you needed a mid, you have that on deck. So mid blocks are less valuable in Eraserhead, is what I'm trying to get at. But it makes him a very defensive character. You have access to speed hate. You pick up a block that's a +1 mod block, which is one of the best blocks in this game. And then there's Kiroshima, which is what I think to be the best of both worlds. Good offense and defense. And if any of you are coming into the stream, you know, hearing about other players playing Kiroshima and they're saying like, I can't kill with Kiroshima, I think that's another topic for another day, but I will say that Kiroshima should not have any problems killing your opponent. What are your thoughts on Plus Ultra Mina, real quick? Is she not competitive? So Plus Ultra Mina, you're talking about the new promo that you can get from the tournament packs. I wouldn't say she's not competitive. I think that she has a niche. She plays with her deck and interacts in a way that no other character can. And usually when you have characters like that, that's a very powerful point and tool to your kit. And the reason why it's powerful is because the more cards that come out, the better. And there's like a plethora of different UFS characters from the past in history. The more cards that came out, there were ways to break those characters and make them even stronger because of their unique abilities. And I think Mina is one of those characters. I think that a lot of times people look at the obvious. So I'll give you an example. This All Might character, there's at least 3 different builds off the top of everyone's head. And that's the All symbol, you can play a Staff Strike deck. The Fire symbol, you can play Frigid Heatwave. And then the Good symbol just generically has a bunch of good cards. And the thing is, is when you look at the obvious, you're not gonna find, you know, what makes a character good. So sometimes you just have to dig deeper. And that's how we got to this deck list, which runs 16 different combos attacks. And I don't think there was anybody, you know, willing to look for this combination of cards. And I think it works well. I think it's a theory that can go far. And I think something like that could exist for Mina. But you know what? I created a background specifically just for this, or I should say a scene. So we can look up Mina real quick. So Mina, oh, they already have Mina 2. There we go. Okay. So once per turn, your turn, discard a card. After you check a card, you may play it as your next form. That's pretty good. This essentially means that if you got lucky, you can play any card and you don't have to check for it. They do require you to discard a card, so it's kind of like it's as if you were playing the card from your hand, you know, because you're not minusing, you're not also plussing, you're staying even, because you're getting up to play a card from your deck, but you're discarding a card to play that, so it's like a 1-for-1. So you're evening out with the cost there, which is not a bad thing. I'm just notating that just to let you know, like, you're not plussing, you're not minusing, which is not bad. So yeah, you could do a lot of cool things with this. I mean, if you needed to play an attack, if you needed to play a specific foundation. So what's cool with this Mina is this is very powerful if you're going second. So Mina, if she's going second, on the last card you're playing, because she is readied, so you can use her abilities. What you can do is, if you are checking well and you're playing enough foundations to where they're like all played safe, and you know the next card you check for it, and after you check a card, oh, okay, so after you pass a bunch of foundations and you feel like the next card that you're about to check for or would check for would fail, what you can do is you can discard a card and build one extra foundation. So Mina going second is a lot more powerful than Mina going first, I think. Or actually, no, I shouldn't say that, because first player advantage is always just better than second. So I guess I should say that if you're going second with Mina, you have the ability to close the gap even further from first and second. Enhance your attack gets +1 speed if it deals damage, gain 1 health. So that's cool. You get free stats on every one of your attacks. And then you also gain health if they deal damage. And what's cool is that can be used on throws as well. So if you wanted to make a throw deck, you could. Like, water has 2 throws. So you could play two different throws, like tape swing and, well, what do you call it? Grasping tape toss. And those are just like very, you know, cards that you do not want to block. The difference is, I think a lot of people are not playing the water symbol defensively in an optimal way, I should say. Because compared to all of the other, you know, more played symbols with water, they don't have, water doesn't have the staple foundations that you're just like, oh, this is absolutely a 4x, you know. There's not enough consistent speed hate compared to like other symbols. I think other symbols have better speed hate than water does. Water has access to them, I just don't think people are playing it optimally. But I mean, I don't blame them. The reason why they're not playing it optimally is because it's kind of like you have 2 choices and they're both not easy to make. And I think that people are choosing the wrong one. So my water builds are a lot different than other people's. What's up, Kumakami? It has been a long time. I've been well. hope you've been well also. Hope you've been able to get some Mega Man content. So do I think she's competitive? I think almost every character can be played at a or B. So this is my tier list. I got S, A, B, C, and D. That's my tier list. If you're an S, that means that you're in top of the game, cream of the crop. But I think that all characters can at least be played at a or B tier. I think that characters are designed that way. But I do think that some characters exist in like the C and D tier, and you just can't like stop it. Like, I guess Mount Lady. Mount Lady would be the one character I'd be like, you know, you could play her, but she's not very competitive. So I would put Mina above Mount Lady, probably near the higher B, low A tier. That's what I'm thinking. Life has been pretty bad this month, but I am surviving. I haven't done anything Mega Man in a while. On break from everything content related. I feel that. Yeah, I don't blame you. This is a crazy time to be living in. So, you know, I do wish you the best, and I hope that, you know, everything goes well for you, my man. You are interested in MHA CCG, so you wanted to see what's up. You know, because I know you, and I would love to see more people play this game. If you have, actually, even if you don't have a locals, if you want, send me an address in DMs, and I'll send you 2 playable decks. You know, they might not be the fanciest things, but I can definitely send you 2 decks, and, you know, even tell me like what's your favorite character. I'd be able to send you something. That's what I love about this game is, you know, I can do stuff like that because all the characters are commons and uncommons. So if you have a favorite character, should be no problem. Can I explain what win conditions is this? How it works? You're not familiar with the game? So this game is based off of a fighting game. So you have your character, your starting character. That's like your, you know, you're selecting a character from the roster. If you're playing like Street Fighter, Tekken, whatever. And the cards that you have access to, the main 2 are attack cards, which is kind of like doing special moves like Shoryuken, Hadouken, you know, Fireball. Or I guess if you play like Smash Bros with Mega Man in there, it would be kind of like using a Mega Buster, or, you know, doing a kick, or doing the flame uppercut in Smash. That's what the attack cards are for. And the game is designed in a way that you play these cards, and it's effectively like playing a card game, but doing moves that you would in a fighting game. It's essentially like a translation between the two genres. And then next up you have foundations, which are how you regulate. You know, this regulates like the early to mid to late game. So you build these foundations, and the more you have late game, the more things you have to do. It's the way you scale. This game is really dope. It's why I'm playing this game. Like, real talk between us, I could be playing any card game I want right now. Like, I could be playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel just came out. I could be playing Digimon. I could be playing so many other card games, but this one, real talk, it doesn't matter. This is the best CCG out there, and right now it's popping off. You know, because you have the $250,000 championship that got announced. You got qualifiers that they'll fly you out to the championship if you win or what have you, if you earn your placement in the qualifier. So that's really sick. And I know that they want to, you know, they're hearing the community, so they want to make this the best year for CCGs, for the CCG players, and that's why all my chips are down. All my chips are down for my hero right now. So that's why I'm playing, and that's also why I'm here, because I want to grow the game. I want more people to play. But yeah, if you play attack cards, that's how you kill your opponent. And there's so many cool things you can do. There's a lot of cool combos. The ability to make decks in this game is insane. There's infinite potential. You can make newly drafted decks. Like this deck, for example, I built this deck and I put it on private because it was spicy. I'm actually going to make it unprivate now. Like nobody was playing this combination of cards because there's more obvious answers, and that's usually what people go to. But for me, I was thinking like, is there something else out there that we can build where you're not having to spend $40 for a card? Because the other two builds, or All Might too, the DLC All Might, they're expensive. You have to spend $40 on Plus Ultras or Frigid Heat Waves, and you need 4 of those. That's $160. But with this deck, I mean, the Texas Smash I think are $12. Blinding Cough Capture should be like around $2. Detroit Smash, I'll give that to you. That's like a $30 card, but you don't actually need it. I just thought it was the coolest attack that you could put in there for the most effect. You haven't touched CCG physically since Dragon Ball Z. I do recommend, you know, if you're interested in a hobby and playing CCGs again, I do recommend playing this one. Like, I know you, Kuma, and I'll take care of you. I really will. If you got the time to play some MHA, and you know, there's a lot going on for this game. The community is awesome. We have a big Discord. We have like, what is it? A 20,000 person Discord. Lot of people. So yeah, just hit me up. You know, if you're interested in joining this game, the community, I'll show you the community. I'll show you what things you can do, and I'll send you some stuff to get started. And that's what I love about the game. Like, even if you have opponent that spent like a lot of money, this is not a pay-to-win game. My Hero Academia is not a pay-to-win game. Just because you have expensive card doesn't mean that, you know, you're gonna outright beat me. It's skill. At the end of the day, it's skill. Alright. But let's get back into today's content, which is defense. Let's see. Okay. So again, we have the all offense builds, we have the all defense builds, and then you have the best of both worlds. You know, you have offense and defense. And generally it depends on which character or style that you're picking that you want to, you know, figure out what choices you have to make, because that's the hard part. The hard part is understanding what choices do you have to make for your particular playstyle and deck. So I wrote that list earlier. Here we go. Okay, we're gonna go from a top to bottom of how to be defensive. Okay, and we're gonna run the stream as long as it takes to get this content into the VOD. All right, so first things first is, how do you optimize defense in a deck? And that's why I pulled out the All Might deck, is because the All Might deck is the most aggressive on the table. So that would mean that it has generally the less defense because it's so aggressive. It is really an aggressive deck. So let's take a look at what we got. So it is my opinion that attacks are meant for attacking and foundations are meant for defense. Now, this isn't absolutely true across the board at all, because there are attacks out there that are more defense, and then there are attacks out there that are more offense. But generally, the rule of thumb, what I'm trying to say is that you want to focus on defense with your foundations, and then you want to focus on attacks with your attacks. You know, offense with attacks, defense with foundations. That's generally what you want to do. You know, if you have that mindset going in, it'll be harder for you to fail. And I think that, you know, a lot of players miss that concept because, you know, the cool thing about this game is you have your attack cards, and that webcam though, fresh. Yeah, Paul, welcome to the stream. Thank you. I appreciate you. We got some good content today. We're gonna be doing defense. So yeah, again, defense is very important. There's a saying out there, you know, offense can win games, but defense wins championships. And that is absolutely true. So a lot of my game decisions on stream in tournament plays, they are based on like defense is the most important thing. I don't care if like I have this super amazing attack that I know that if I play it next turn, it's gonna cause some havoc. But if I have the option to use that very offensive card to block my opponent's attack and stop like 8 damage, 10 damage coming my way, you bet I'm gonna block that attack. Because, you know, blocking should be the most important thing on your turn. But we'll get into that more later on. Right now, let's focus on how do you optimize defense in a deck. So again, attacks are for attacking, although they can be defensive. And foundations, they should be for defense. So let's talk about optimizing. And I think we talked about this before on another stream or in my YouTube video on why we played, you know, the foundations we do for this deck. But I'm going to run over it again. So for anybody that missed it, you know, you'll be filled into the loop. Also, this is good for context. So I don't know who's played Magic the Gathering or any type of other game. It's really just games in general. But there are those type of players and those types of interactions where you're trying to do something and the person sitting across from you, they said no. And how did they say no? They said, oh, you trying to do that? And then they're like, nah, get that out of here. And that's what Night Watch is, the card that I'm flinging around. Night Watch says, enhance remove 1 action card from your discard pile. Cancel 1 non-character enhance your rival plays. This card is the king of all cancel abilities right now. So these 3 symbols, all death and void, in my opinion, should be playing 4 copies of Night Watch all the time, because it is so integral for your opponent to have their game plan to be consistent and throughout all the way do what they're trying to do. But if you have a card on the field that they cannot interact with, and they are about to play a very important enhance, they're about to play a very important ability that sets up their game plan or is their game plan, and you can just stop it, should always play the card. Which is why we played under the all symbol. This is an offensive deck, but I'm telling you, I'm playing the most defensive, the most busted foundation card on defense in this build. And what's really cool is this All Might works very well with Night Watch. And the reason why is because Night Watch requires there to be an action card in your discard pile. But this All Might, every time you attack, you can discard the top 4 cards of your deck. So you go 1, 2, 3, 4. And when you're milling, you have a really good chance of milling an action card, which feels into Night Watch, which is why we play 4. So the earlier you get that online, the better off you are. And that's why we play Night Watch. You know, anytime you have access to a defensive card that completely stops your opponent, or, you know, basically flips the table, they're like, you know, you're stopping their game plan. You're making their turn like feel awful. That is your goal. Your goal is to make your opponent's attack turn feel as awful as possible. That is your goal on defense. When it is your turn to defend, that is what you should be doing. And with cards like Night Watch, that's a really easy thing to do. Next up, for our defensive foundations, we play 4 copies of Specials of Sound. Now this card, really cool, is a responsibility that you can use after your opponent plays an attack. You can give the attack -3 speed. And why is this so good is because speed is how you block attacks. And that's also how your opponent gets to interact with making an attack like unblockable, almost unblockable. To guarantee damage, your opponent has to interact with speed. And if you can reduce the speed, this is how you start to survive in a turn. Because there's two integral parts of being defensive in the game right now that I can think of, and that's having cards in hand to block. That's one. I'm trying to put my fingers here. So the first part is having cards in your hand to block with. And then the second part is being able to interact with speed and block modification. Because that's really all you need to block. Have a card to block with, and then number 2, making sure you're able to block because of stats. And that's exactly what this card does. So I'll give you an example. The reason why Specials of Sound is so good in a 4x of every deck that the symbols are played under, air, all, and good, is because you have to look at it at a mathematical standpoint. Every card in your deck, can we agree on this? Let's agree on this. Every card in your deck is counting at least 1, okay? Every card is counting towards 1. And what I mean by that is, at face value, the least amount of value that you can get from a card is 1. But where does that change? You know, where does like game design start to take in place? Where does playing against your opponent start to take into place? That is the abilities on the cards, which is why deck building is so important. Because when you're building a deck where you're choosing what abilities go into your deck and what cards you will see. So that's why we're talking about optimizing defense in a deck, because it's all about deck building at the end of the day. So why do you see this card, 4 copies in every deck that plays its symbols? The reason why you see this card is because it changes the numerical value of what this card means to you. Because normally, if this card was blank, this card is counting towards 1. This is a 1 value point. But because of the text that says -3 speed, all of a sudden that's worth 3. That's worth 3 to you now. So if you have a card in your deck that says that it changes a numerical value to you from 1 to 3 against your opponent, that's huge. That's really huge. And that's why you should play cards like that. And that's actually going back to what I was talking about with water. Like, you know, anybody can hate me for my opinion on this, but let's move to the card database. Let's go to UVS Ultra real quick. I have a spicy take on this, and you know, with the current context, I want to bring it up. All right, so I want to look up Rescue Completed. I think this card is good in certain situations and deck builds, but generally, I do not think that this card is a 4x in every deck that you play it under. And the reason being is because I'm looking at it from a pros and cons standpoint. The pro is that this is one of the more consistent speed hate cards in water that you have access to. But the con for me is, number one, it's a 3-div. Number two, it's a low block, which not a lot of people are playing low attacks right now. There are low attacks in the meta, don't get me wrong there. But I think when you go into tournament play, you know, you want to play enough low blocks to where you're okay in that matchup, but you don't want to play too many low blocks to where you start forgetting about what's actually being played, which is high attacks and mid attacks. So you just want to have enough. You want to level it out. It's all about balance. So to me, those are two strikes against it in the con side. And to me, this is like, the cons are overweighing the pros. Like, sure, the ability is cool. You can commit one foundation and give an attack -2 speed. But to me, what you're doing is you are turning a 1 to a 2 when you have cards like this that when you have cards like Specialists of Sound that turn a 1 to a 3. To me, I don't think that in the situations that Rescue Completed is supposed to turn a 1 to a 2, I don't think it's worth the cons. So I'm not saying the card is bad, I'm just saying that I would not value this as a 4x. I'd probably play 1 or 2 at best if I'm even playing it at all. I think that there are other better cards. I mean, you could play this as like a 1 or 2. And then you could play, let's see, there's another card I like, Sticky Balls. My man Mineta, where you at? There we go. You could play 2 Rescue Completed, 2 Sticky Balls, and that's balance right there. Because you have 4 cards that are speed hate. And once you go to game 2, game 3, you can side in 2 more Sticky Balls. And then that means that you have 4 copies of Sticky Balls, game 2 and 3, if your opponent's not playing a range deck. And if they're not playing a range deck, you have 4 copies in your card deck that completely stop an attack. Because this turns a 1 to a 4 in numeric values. So that's just looking at the water symbol and looking at defense. So let's go back to optimization for defense. What do we got? All right. So we talked about how this changes to a 1 to a 3. That's great. And then now we go into offense. So this is not really a defensive card, but we play it because, you know, it's okay for you to have offensive options in your defensive lineup. I just think that defense should matter more, but that doesn't mean that you can't include offense. So with that example being said, this is me telling you, as much as I'm preaching defense right now, there are moments where it does make sense to have some offense. And this would be one of them. You know, we do play enough weapon attacks. Sometimes you do need an extra 2 damage. That's how you do it. You play this card, which I don't think a lot of people, you know, are playing or see it. Because one of the weaknesses Staff Strike decks have, and this is not a Staff Strike deck, but one of the weaknesses is getting enough damage. And you never want to be caught lacking damage So having this in your deck and playing it on board is just a super nice thing to have. So that's our 2 difficult foundations. Let's look at our 1 diffs, which is where we actually start talking about more and more defense. Here we go. But maybe we should talk about the actions first, because eventually we have to get to Mediator. So I'm going to very quickly go over the action cards in our deck, you know, for defense and deck choices. And that's these. So again, remember, this is an offense deck. Like, this is all offense. You're supposed to be aggro, but you also want to have enough defense. So how do you do that? So the reason why we're not playing any plus ultras, and I've preached plus ultra before. Plus ultra is the I shouldn't use words like omni, but it's like one of the god cards of offense and defense, because offensively, that card can get you enough damage or speed to kill your opponent. Defensively, it can also make it to situations where you have a chance to block your opponent's attack, because it's solving 2 problems. And that's why the card is expensive and why it's good. It's solving 2 problems as a defensive player. Number 1, it is the card that you use to block with. And it can block any attack in the game. Except Tape Swing, but that's a whole different story. And then number 2, it reduces the speed. So things that we're talking about, like numerical value. If your opponent is sending a 12 speed attack at you, that means that they are saying, if you don't have this amount of cards on your field, you're going to take this damage, and if it's lethal, you die. So cards like Plus Ultra, they say, well, I don't give a darn about your 12 speed. I'm going to play this block that reduces that 12 to a 5, and I just need to check a 5 to block this attack. So that's why Plus Ultra is good. But for offense, and for the sake of All Might, and for the sake of Blinding Cloth Capture, because Blinding Cloth Capture says, you know, once you play an action card this turn, you can reduce the difficulty on this attack card from 5 to 3, which makes it easier to play. And then also, if you played an action card, you can combo enhance, make your opponent discard 1 card from their hand. So it is very important to us to have action cards in our deck that we can use at a moment's notice, right? You never want to be caught in a situation where you have this setup, but because one of the pieces are not ready, you're not able to go out. You know, do you ever want to be in the situation where you're like, I have the cards to do this, but because one of them does not have the conditions met, I can't do what I'm trying to do. You don't want to be like that. So the reason why we don't play Plus Ultra is because Plus Ultra has a cost, and the cost is you needing to have 1 momentum. And that's why we don't play Plus Ultra. And I'm looking at that as a optimal standpoint. I'm not looking at it as like it's a $40 card standpoint, right? And I was able to find different actions that we can use, and they're not bad. These are good offense and defense action cards. They're not on the same level as Plus Ultra, but for this deck's purposes, it's enough. It's good. It's awesome. So let's talk about Capture Evildoers. Capture Evildoers is on offense. You can use it to remove 1 rival momentum, and if you do, you can add a momentum from the top card of your deck to your momentum. And it's very important to note that your opponent does not need to have a momentum for you to activate this effect. However, if you want the momentum to go to your momentum, they do need to have the momentum to fulfill the ability because of the way it's worded. And this card removes itself from the card pool, so it doesn't clog your pool. But when you're using this offensively, it does give you the trigger to have playing an action card, and then now your Blinding Cloth Capture is online. which is very integral to the deck. So that's what it looks like on offense. But on defense, I should mention this, is that all of these are +1 mid blocks, and they also have breaker 1. So let's talk about +1 mid blocks, or +1 blocks in general. You have a total of 4 different numerical values, 4 different numbers that are printed on cards, block mods. And the math is all there. If you can look at the math, you don't have to understand it fully, because I definitely, you know, don't have the math at all times. But if you can simply look at it, that's all I'm asking is just look at the math. If you can look at the math, you can start to have an understanding of how do you set yourself up for success, right? That's the main point I'm trying to make here. How do you set yourself up for success? So let's give an example. If you were taking a test, if you were in school, high school, whatever, SATs, ACT, whatever, if you were taking a test, would you study for the test or wing it? You know? And that's the same thing as deck building. When you're building a deck, I hate to compare it to studying because studying is so boring. But this game is a lot of fun. This is where studying actually makes sense and is fun. And this is why I'm going to explain the numbers to you. Is if you study and you can respect the numbers enough and look at what you're putting into the deck, your gameplay and your success rate winning against your opponent will go way up. It'll go straight through the roof. So you don't want to wing deck building. You want to at least look at the numbers. And I think that's one aspect to the game that does not get looked at. And I'm really happy for everyone that's here, because I'm showing this to you. And this is what I a lot of times ask myself during games and tournament gameplays. And I even asked this against one of my opponents yesterday. I asked him, I was like, you got a +1 or +2 block in your hand at all? And they're like, nope, I only got 3s. So I said, all right, well, that means that in the best case scenario, if you add your +3 to my attack speed, which was like 5, and you check the top card of your deck, which is probably going to be a 5 or a 6, on best case scenario, and you start to count that all up, you will not be able to pass the check even in the best case scenario of you checking a 5 or a 6. So effectively, no matter how this is going to go, you know, you are going to take the damage from my attack. And that's the context I'm trying to point out, is that the lower your block mod is, the better, because block mod is essentially another way you're manipulating the numbers to where you're saying like, okay, my opponent has a 5 speed attack. Well, I have a +1 mid block. So because the +1 mid block is better than a 3, it gives me a way better chance to play the 1 mod block and block it. So anytime you see a card that has a +1 or lower mod block, that card is insane. If you see a 2, it's an average card. If you see a 3, you know, that card just has a block on it. So again, all of what I'm trying to say is all the action cards that we have in our deck, because they're +1 mid blocks, that means that they're very optimal blocks to use and keep in hand. And then they also have Breaker, which makes your opponent's next card to play 1 harder to play, which could potentially end their turn. So that's the actions. I guess we could talk about Erase, because I didn't actually get into, you know, what can you use with this offensively. And what you can do with this card offensively is you can seal 1 rival foundation. That seal lasts for the whole turn. And the cards that you want to use this on are cards that are defensive. Cards that your opponent can be like, -3 speed on your attack. That's really defensive. Cancel an enhance. Cancel a non-character enhance. You can seal cards like Night Watch. There's so many choices you can do with Erase. And double it up with Blinding Cough Capture. You can seal 2 foundations and eliminate those defensive options from your opponent. That's so good. So now get into our spam foundations, which are 1 difficulty and lower. Let's look at Destined for Mainstream Success. I look at this card in 2 ways. The way I look at it is, number 1, you can use this card to get you a card off the top of your deck and add it to your hand, and that means that you have another block to play. And if it's your turn, you can call Foundation, add the card to your hand. That also means that you can build another card to your Foundation stage area, whatever. You know, there's +1 in hand size is really strong. Drawing cards is, you know, historically the best mechanic in card games ever. And that's what this card can potentially do. And because, you know, decks are built in a way that you have more foundations than attacks, if you're looking to get a card into your hand and you need a blind fish to try and grab a card, what you should be naming with Destined for Mainstream Success is Foundation. Because there's a very high chance that the top card of your deck is going to be a Foundation. Now, alternatively, the other way to use Destined for Mainstream Success is on defense. So that's why I say this card has 2 things about it, and it solves those 2 integral parts to defense, which is having the block in hand and also being able to block the card at all, you know, with speed and checks and block mods. So on defense, if you're blocking an opponent's attack, what you can do is you can name attack card, reveal the top card of your deck. If it is an attack card, you get to add it to your hand, so you're removing that 3 check, and you're potentially having a very high chance of turning that 3 check that was on top of your deck into a 5. In that case, you just turned a 1 to a 3, which is exactly why, exactly like Specialist of Soundwave. Remember, we said Specialist of Soundwave turns a 1 to a 3. Well, Destined for Mainstream Success has the potential to do the same thing, which is turning a 3 check into a 5. So you essentially +2 on being able to block some type of attack that you're defending against. So that's why this card is awesome. I love the design on it. That's why we play 4. Next up, we have Mediator. We're supposed to have 4 copies of this, but... oh, there it is. It's hiding. 4 copies of Mediator. And why is this card good? It's the same thing as Specialist of Sound. You pop it, you -3 speed, and if you played an action card this turn, and playing an action card is really just blocking with one. So if you blocked with an action card, or, I mean, I guess you could use the enhance on them too. Either way you do, playing an action card on your defensive turn, you actually get to draw a card off of Mediator. So you destroy this, give -3 speed. We're just changing that numerical value that I'm constantly beating, you know, into the stream. And then you also get to draw 1 card. So it solves 2 problems: speed and having cards in hand. 4x all day. Next we play Celebrity Status. You know, this is really more for spice. And the way it's spicy is because All Might has the ability to turn any momentum into a draw card. So let's just say you hit your opponent, you know, and attacks build as momentum at the end of your turn. So when you build the momentum, you're essentially stockpiling cards in your hand as All Might. As this DLC All Might, you are stockpiling momentum and using them as cards in your hand. And you can use this in 2 ways. Because of the way that this DLC All Might is worded, you can use it offensively. On your turn, you can draw cards. And you can use it defensively. You can also draw cards on your opponent's attacks. Did I tell you that? That's insane. What characters do you know in their character card can draw cards on your opponent's turn so that they can block? And that's why we have literally 12 different cards. We literally have 12 different cards that interact with the ability to make sure that we can block attacks. This is, you know, turning a 1 to a 3, a 1 to a 3, a 1 to a 3 to making sure that we can block an opponent's attack. Like, this is so much fuel. On top of All Might that turns momentum into cards in our hand, you cannot fail with this defense. Isn't that cool? Isn't that cool how you have this really offensive build, offensive character, and you can use, you know, an ability of it that is meant for offense for some really solid defense. And that's why I wanted to showcase this deck. Because I wanted to take you on this journey of showing you how can you implement a wall of defense in an offensive deck. There are ways to do it. And they're not always going to be clear-cut, you know, the same way in a deck. But I'm showing you how I did it with this deck. And I think that's important to understand. You know, now that you see the different abilities that you have access to, you know, in a deck, and deck building in MHA, which is infinite potential, now you have a different understanding of how do you value cards with their abilities to deck building. Because it's like studying for a test, you know? You want to study, make sure you're doing well. You don't want to wing it. And that's why I love having each and every one of you here. Because that means that, you know, you're willing to hear what I got, and hopefully that helped you out. That's really I can all ask for at the end of the day. The last card that I'm going to showcase for our foundations and for the deck really is It Can't Be Fixed. And there are a lot of cards printed like this for different symbols. I recommend playing them. You know, because they're so cheap in cost. You know, it's a 0 difficulty. It's a 5 check, which is 5 check is good. And you have the +1 high block. The stats are really good. The ability itself, though, is niche. And the reason why it's niche is because there are not going to be a lot of situations where you're going to be able to pop off the ability. But if you can use the ability, it is nice. But this is not the reason why you play it in the deck. The ability is not why you play it in the deck. The reason why you play it in the deck because of the stats. And I do like to keep at least 4 0 diff foundations in my decks, because that means that if I draw it on turn 1, I'm guaranteeing myself +1 foundation against my opponent. So I can use that foundation to play attacks. I can use it to block cards. There's so much you can do with that. That means that you are essentially, in a way, numerically outrunning your opponent. And that's why we play 4 copies. It's also a good defense card. So if you have this in hand later in the game, you can block it as a high and feel good about it. But there's also one more thing. Can't remember. Oh well. I can't remember what it was. But I think I hit the nail on the head for why you should play this card. Oh well. But yeah, that's optimizing defense in a deck. And you know what? We still got a whole list to go. So if you got the time, I got the time. We got some more in-depth content for this stream. One second. All right, I'm back. So we just talked about deck building and optimizing defense in a deck. Let's talk about priority of playing foundations. So what do I mean by priority of playing foundations? This is where you have a 6 cards in your hand. You drew a hand, and it doesn't matter what point of the game you're in. You have a hand of cards, and you're trying to play them. And the biggest thing that new players are trying to figure out when they first start MHA and they're doing a demo game is they're like, how do I read all this information in my hand? And how do I sequence playing these cards? What's the best way, right? And the thing is that, you know, players do get better every time they play, but sequencing and playing priorities of foundations is one of the things that can always be improved on. I don't care, you know, how long you've been playing. I don't care if you've been playing longer than the next guy. Priority of playing foundations is one concept that you must have down, can improve on for defense. And that's what we're going to showcase here. That's why I'm shuffling the cards right now, is because I'm going to do a hand of solitaire or fishbowl and show you how exactly I would play foundations in my hand. And then after that, we still got a lot more topics, so it's going to be a wild ride tonight. But that's cool. I don't go to work until like 5 hours from now, so we got the time. It's going to be a longer than usual stream tonight. So shout outs to all of you, you know, being here again. Oh, this is how I shuffle, by the way. I do at least 2 pile shuffles because from my experience, this is how you get the best randomization of not cheating, blah, 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 and giving yourself a fair shot at a game. Because that's all I can ask for is I despise having information that I shouldn't have because I consider it cheating. So what I do is I pile shuffle twice and I make sure that I shuffle enough so that way I'm giving myself and my opponent a fair shot. And that's really all you can ask for. So I do 2 pile shuffles. That's my method. All right, let's look at what we got. So I cut the deck, I shuffled, let's draw our hand. You get 6 cards, and let's just say we're going first. Let's just say that we're so good we won the die roll. So this is not a bad hand. It could be better. And the reason why it's not bad is because we're guaranteed 3 foundations, which is the average of how many foundations you can play on turn 1. And that's just a you know, state of the fact, you know, pen on paper factoid that is just generally true. The most foundations that you usually build on turn 1 as first player is 3. So this is not a bad hand, but we can do better. And it's chancy, but I think we do it. The reason why I'm about to mulligan this hand is because, like, cool, we get the 3 foundations and we're going first. That's awesome and neat. Love it. But, again, like, we only play this so that way we can guarantee a 4th foundation. Because if this is played on slot 4, we're guaranteeing ourselves a foundation. But if we're playing it on slot 2 and 3, it doesn't make sense because we're playing cards that are effectively not having abilities that we can use with relevancy, you know, mid to early to mid game. Really the only foundation we can use is Mediator. So by using that logic, that tells me let's mulligan this hand. Let's get rid of it. I want to have as much advantage as I can, and it's decisions like these during the mulligan step that turn you from a player to a champion. These are the type of decisions you have to make and you have to look at. So that's my thought process. Let's see what we get next. Hopefully we don't shoot ourselves in the foot and look really dumb. Okay, all right. So this is definitely better than the last. we're able to get a nice curve, and all of our foundations do something. Beautiful. That's what I wanted. I think we keep this. If we play, you know, Russian roulette again, I think we're gonna get shot. But we will have to shuffle our deck because we did just take the mulligan. But let's see what would happen, because I love doing this, and you can do this at home too when you're fishbowling. Is you can look and see what could have been. I'm keeping this because this is the most logical, competitive, like, you know, play is to keep this hand. But let's look if we try to risk it again, because there is a world where you have 4 foundations in your hand and you try to play all of it, and if you succeed with it, you know, that's even better. So let's look. Okay, so if we mulligan again, and I'm not saying this is where it's kind of bad. You do not want to look into like what could have been and use that as data to like be like, okay, next time I will risk it all and potentially shoot myself in the foot. Like, that's not what you want to do. I'm just showing you this because it's fun. So don't use this as any type of data to be like, okay, next time I have a, you know, an average hand and I can run with it, I'm gonna risk it all. No, don't do that. Do not do that. Absolutely do not do that. So what you do here, if you had this hand, this is a good hand. This is better than the last one. The priority of playing foundations is playing the defense one, playing the offense one, and why are you playing the defense one? Because again, defense and foundations is the most important thing. Let me move my hand. Defense in foundations is the most important thing. It's more important than offense. So that's why we're not playing start with the basics. We're not playing this card the first. We're playing Specialists of Sound first, because it's our defensive option. This tells our opponent, no, stop what you're doing. Get that stuff out of here. I don't want that. As the first card we play in the turn. But now we're going to play Start with the Basics next. And why are we playing this card? It's because it is a 2-to foundation, and this is all about curve. This is not in the sense of like game logic of like, oh, I need defense on the field. This is the sense of MHA mechanic, where we're talking about the curve. Okay, so let's talk about the curve, and I can show it here too. Is there are generally 2 kinds of checks in your deck in MHA, and this is where it starts to like pull from poker. If you have played poker, great. If you haven't, it's a fun game. Like, everybody loves poker. There's a reason why so many people play poker. And it's because of the flip. When you're flipping cards off the top of the river or whatever in poker, you are getting this excitement of looking at the top card, and does it meet your expectations or does it fall short? So you have that really fun dopamine excitement coming at you, and that's MHA and that's poker, and that's why I love this game. And that's why you generally have these 2 numbers. If you get a 5, you're sitting good, you're good looking, you are happy, you are like cloud 9. You check a 3, you feel bad. But there are ways where you can manipulate the curve to where even a 3 does not feel bad. And that's called, I wouldn't say deck manipulation for like face value, but it kind of is. What you're essentially doing is you are expecting the worst case scenario and you are working around it. That's what you're doing. And that's why we're doing it that way with Start with the Basics, is because that's how you curve out. Because I'll show you 2 different ways that we could have played this turn. So let's say we did it the bad way. Okay, we're going to do it the bad way. And the bad way is playing this on a 2, playing this on a 2, 1, 2, and then this on a 3, which is the lowest. So the lowest we can get is a 3. We still got it. But now let's try to check this on a 5. So we're playing one of the highest cost cards in our hand, and we're playing as our 4th card. Our 4th. If we check a 3, that card's gonna fail. But had we done it the other way, it's kind of like in the same sense, because you either check a 3 or a 5 and you fail it. But it's like, you know, if you check a 4, then you're good here. Or if you're second player, this actually makes more sense saying if you were second. So if you did this, if you check a 3, there's no way you're passing the 5. But if you do it the other way around and you curve it out from highest to lowest, you check a 3, you can commit All Might, because you can commit your starting character card to pay for the cost. And boom, you just paid for a 4 difficulty and you build 4 foundations down instead of 3. So that's one way to look at it. So I'm going to shuffle this out, and we are going to continue with our fishbowl, and we're going to talk about, you know, priority of playing foundations. And we're going to do this for a couple turns, because I do think that there is a change of dynamic from when you're going first on your first turn, and then when you're going to like later turns in the game. I think there is a difference. So this one's pretty easy. There's no way we can fail the cards in our hand. So 2, 2, 3. Cool. Now we go into our next turn. This is our hand. Let's go ahead and review. Review is where you discard a card before you draw, and this effectively allows you to draw 1 more card in your hand. So we're going to draw 4 instead of 3. And this is what our hand is looking like. Now, for this particular hand, you know, what I'm going to explain to you is not about priority of foundations, but it is part of like, what would you do in this situation? And it's important that you know this. So sometimes it just does not make sense to play an attack. It really doesn't. Because the cards in your opponent's hand right now, let's try to imagine an opponent, okay? I'm actually gonna move the stuff on my camera so I can give you a better visual. So, you know, if you can, you know, watch closely. Let's just say we're playing All Might against Mineta, okay? Just watch closely. This is Mineta's field. This is Mineta's hand. This is Mineta's deck. Okay? This Mineta player has a setup. What is their setup? Their setup is they have 3 foundations and 2 cards in hand. That is what you're facing. That's what you're looking at. And here's the thing. When you're playing against the opponent from you, they have a fixed amount of cards. On your turn, the only way they're going to be able to change their fate or draw more cards is on cards on the field. And maybe cards in the hand, depending on what deck it is and what options they have. But generally it's on the field. And in most cases, you have to look at the field and be like, okay, did they set themselves up to be able to block an attack? Generally, the answer to that statement is going to be yes. Because most players do not like getting hit. They don't like taking damage. And you have to be able to look at their board and use that as a telegraph. Use that as information to be like, oh, he has 2 cards in hand and he also has 3 foundations ready. That means that he can at least block 1 attack. Is that a fair assumption to make? You have to ask yourself that. Is it a fair assumption for me to make that the 3 cards on my opponent's side of the field and 2 cards in their hand, that means that they get to block 1 attack at least. Is that fair? I think it's fair. So let's review our hand again. We have 1 attack card. We can choose to attack with this, but why would we? Why would we attack with this card? If we attack with this card, let me tell you what's going to happen. 1 second. Alright, cool. At first I blind picked what cards were in Manetta's hand, but now I sculpted them for this exact situation. So let's say we did it the bad way, and I call this the bad way because I think this is unoptimal. We had all the signs to tell us that we should not play this attack at all. I'm telling you straight up, we should not be playing this attack. But I'm gonna do it in the fishbowl to show you why playing this attack at this particular moment with this hand is very unoptimal and is gonna put you in a corner, and it's putting your opponent ahead of you. I'm gonna show you how. And I really want you to pay attention to this. So how does this happen? We play the attack, check for it, cool, great. All Might should be ready. Mill 4, give it 2 damage, okay? Do whatever else, send it. 4 high for 5. Our opponent. I'm going to block with a high block, check it, tap 1 to make it a 6. Your attack just got blocked. So what happens to attacks at the end of the turn when they're blocked? They go to the discard pile. And we did not gain anything from playing this attack. We didn't draw a card. We didn't draw a card to replace it. We didn't build a foundation. We didn't make anything easier for us at all. We made 0 progression. We did 0 damage. We didn't add momentum. We didn't reduce anything from our opponent. What we did was we threw a punch and it hit a wall. Like, you're punching into a wall here. You are, struggling and fighting to make some type of progression. And the fact of the matter is, you did nothing. You did nothing with the 1 attack card in your hand. And that is something that is very important for a lot of My Hero Academia players to look at. Is you have to be able to look at your opponent's side of the field. Like, they have 3 ready cards. They have 2 cards in hand. They can at least block 1 of the attacks from me. That's fair. Cool. I only have 1 attack card in my hand. If I play it and it gets blocked, do I have any type of progression? No. But let me tell you what did happen. Is by you playing that attack, that means that you have 1 less card to block with on your next turn. Because you used that card to attack your opponent and it gained you nothing. You got nothing from playing that attack card. And now you have 1 less card in your hand to block with on your next turn. So the correct line of play is to not play the attack and to hold the attack card into your hand as a block for next turn. And if your opponent does not attack you and force you to block with the card, that means that you have 1 extra attack card going into your next turn. So you want to have this mindset of stockpiling cards for your later turns, because you want to be able to optimize what you're doing. Because My Hero Academia is not all about dumping your hand every single turn. It's not. That's not what the game is about. The game is about using your cards in creative ways that make sense in the long run, because that's how you win. It's not playing your cards optimally like every single turn and dumping your hand out. That's not what it's about. And here's another reason why you don't want to throw the Texas Smash being your only attack is this Mediator player, once they blocked, their next turn going in, they're always going to have 6 cards. So you throwing the attack at them and them blocking the attack, they will always be able to draw up to 6. So if their 6th card happens to be another attack, then you really, really, really did no progression at all. You know? Because they will always get those 6 cards in hand. But here's another thing I can tell you. Let's just say the Mediator player didn't have this Reciprocal Burst in hand. They actually had 2 foundations. So this is a funny thing. If you were in the situation I was in, you had this hand and you played it the optimal way, which is you have 3 cards in your hand, they're all blocks. What you should be doing for a priority of building foundations is you should build all the foundations in your hand. 1, 2, and 3. Now you build it. Why do you do it this way? Is because foundations are how you scale into mid to late game. And when you're scaling mid to late game and having all these foundations ready, this is giving you options for not only your next turn, but the entire game. Which is why it's very integral to have that. And what did we keep in our hand? We did an attack, so now we have an extra block in our hand. And we also have these 2 cards, which are action cards, and they work with Mediator. We have a copy of Mediator here, so that means that if we use these cards to block, we get to pick up another card. We also have 2 copies of Destined for Mainstream Success. So this means that we can use those to manipulate the top card of our deck, and we can also use it for draw. We can use it to make sure that we're, checking the right check that we need. Our defense is looking very solid. Very solid. And now you ended your turn. You ended your turn. This is your second turn. And what happens now to the Mediator player now that you didn't play the attack card? They have to take this hand and now they have to refill it and draw. And they're probably going to draw all foundations. And now they can't attack you. So now you get another turn. So what I'm trying to say is that if by not attacking your opponent, you're putting them in a worse position, because it means that they can't filter out their hand and they can't use the cards that they intended to use for blocking to block. And you're essentially clogging them because they had intended to block and you didn't let them block because you didn't have an optimal attack turn. Then now they're going to get clogged. So that's another aspect to how the cards fall in an MHA. Let's continue. Again, this is a solitaire session, and what we're talking about is priority of playing foundations. So let's start to simulate what a defense turn kind of looks like. I'm gonna really brush past this because this is not the importance of the topic currently. So let's just say we blocked here. Cool, whatever. We got the block, committed, whatever. Pop the next one, -3 speed, draw a card because we played a race. And, let's say it was a mid attack again. Block. Cool, we checked it too. Commit everything. It's blocked. Alright, going into next turn. We have two cards. And again, what I did is I value the attack card in my hand the most. So I kept that as a last resort block. And I blocked with the action cards that I didn't really need. So now we can be okay, now we have 2 cards going into our turn 3 that are attacks. So we draw. And that's what our hand is looking like. This is our hand right now. It's 3 Texas Smashes and 1 Expert Flurry. And this is a really good hand. Because that means that we're getting a ton of damage. So let's just say that our opponent, they played a bunch of cards. They probably kept 2 or 3 cards in hand. I don't know. But with this, we can push out a lot of damage. So we can be okay, on a 4. But it really all depends too. Because sometimes this is where the game gets a little bit more complicated, because you're looking at like how many cards they have in hand, how many cards they have on the field, and you have to try and predict like what's a fair amount that your opponent's going to block your attacks, and is it worth it to play that many attacks in the first place. So if your opponent is like, because technically, you know, I'm in the mindset where I set it up that Mineta player, they drew into all foundations, and if somebody draws into all foundations, that means that they kept back a really good defensive hand, so there's a good chance that they're going to block like most of our attacks because they didn't attack us. So this hand is like really awesome if our opponent like committed out or they overextended. This hand is really awesome. If that's the case, then you go in. You know, you play these attacks, you pump out the damage, you do everything. But let's just say that wasn't the case. What would you do? So what I would do here is I'd play like this. I'd play one attack. I'd play the Texas Smash because it's the, you know, the most common block in our hand right now. I play the Texas Smash, check a 3, commit, and we're kind of like filling out the opponent, right? So if they only had like 2 cards in hand, this is a good moment to be like, okay, let's see what blocks they're holding. And generally, you know, you can take like little signs from playing an attack to see like, you know, what could be the last card in your opponent's hand, because it could be a low block, and if it's a low block, that means that they can't block any high attacks, which our hand is full of high attacks. So if that's the case, then we keep going in. And, you know, as you are resolving the attack, you can see by how your opponent's using their cards. If they're saving their cards for like a potential future moment, that means that, okay, that means that they can block the next attack. But if they're using all their gas on their defensive turn on your first attack, that means that they can't block the second attack, because they're burning all of their defensive options on the first one. So if that's the case, then you just keep going in. But let's just say you needed to poke. And reading what your opponent is doing during the enhanced step gives you a lot of information. And it takes practice, but I promise you it's there. So yeah, we got whatever information, and now you have 2 choices. You can keep going in, or you can start building foundations, which if it was me, I would still build foundations. So that's what we did. And let's just say we needed to block 2 attacks next turn, a high block and a mid block. Cool. And now we go into our, what is this, turn 3, I think, turn 4, something like that. And this is where we're like, we didn't draw attacks. No. So this is where you have to be defensive again. And at this point of the time of the game, this is considered late game, because you have 7 foundations built. To me, late game is like when you're nearing 10 foundations. What's up, Flailing Blue? How you doing? So what you want to do here is you want to make sure that you have enough blocks in your hand. So what I'm going to do is, because I consider this late game, I'm going to play 2 foundations, even though that doesn't get me to 10. That's fine. That means I have 4 cards in my hand to block my opponent next turn, and that's all I need. So let's just say we had to block 3 times. Block, block, and block. And we kept the attack card in hand for obvious reasons. And then now we actually drew into a good hand. And this is what I like about All Might. And this All Might and Detroit Smash, and why we play Detroit Smash into the deck, is because we now have the option to just draw 3 cards. And those cards could be attacks. And we're nearing the end of the cycle. So what I would do here is I would start calculating like how many attacks are in the deck. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 13, 14, 17. So that means that one of these cards on top of my deck is an attack card. So I guess the safe play would be to play bow capturing net, because we want the stun. So we'll play specialist on a 2, check a 3, and then we'll play bow capturing net on a 5, check a 5. Beautiful. Stun 2, build it down, whatever. Mill, move 10. Mill 4. Okay, it resolves. They either blocked it or they didn't. If they blocked it, that actually makes the next card we play even stronger. So that's where we go into... We have the option. We can go to Texas Smash or Detroit Smash. I think we go into Detroit Smash. Because if you go into Detroit Smash, that means Texas Smash becomes a 7 damage attack. So we play Detroit Smash on a 7. Check a 5. Commit these 2. Cards we don't need. Actually, probably this one. So we can reduce and draw 3 cards. 1, 2, 3. And we just drew 2 attack cards off of that. So that's really dope. And this is where we can just pump a lot of damage. So this is like our kill turn. You know, from early to late game, I was showing you all of the different tells and moments you should be thinking about, you know, how do you play this hand and what to look for in your opponent. Because that's really what it is. It's an ebb and flow. It's an ebb and flow of looking at your hand, looking at your opponent's options, even though you can't see their hand, and then adjusting to the right plays. So if you can see it, we went from early game to being able to build our foundations, to mid game to looking at what our hand is telling us and what options we can do based on what our opponent has. And now we carried it out to late game. So now we have this like ridiculous setup. Because look at this, we got bow capture net, Detroit Smash, you know, mill 4 for +4 damage. Assuming that they blocked capturing net would be +4 because you get 2 from this, from the first All Might ability, and then another 2 for the second one. That's a 6 mid for 10 damage attack. And then you can just keep going. Like, look at this. You can just keep going. It's a lot of damage. They're probably dead by then. And if they're not dead by then, what you can do is you can pump the brakes. Because there is such a thing. If this hand does not kill them and you're calculating it, this is what you should be doing. You should be calculating the worst and best case scenarios, because that's what MHA is. When you are attacking your opponent, there's 2 ways it can go, and sometimes 3. If it goes the way you expect it to, does it mean that you win the game? If it's a yes, then you should try to pump out as much as possible until you start getting to a sign where it's like, hey, you know, originally when you started this turn, you were attacking. Well, guess what? Your opponent actually defended pretty well, and you're not going to be able to kill them this turn. As soon as you get that tell that says, even in the best case scenario, and you're not going to be able to kill your opponent, that's when you should be like, let me stop attacking. Let's stop attacking. And when we stop attacking, we start playing foundations. Because, you know, the only other thing that foundations are for is really just to block with. and you don't need them to block. In this case, I already have 10 foundations, so I probably would not play another foundation. I'll just end my turn. I think that's the play, right? So that way you can block and use these cards next turn. That's what I would do. And then just defend and see if you can get to another point where it's like, okay, now I can go in again. You know, it really does not make sense to run yourself into a wall and then fall short. Because if I dump out this hand right here and it doesn't kill them, you should be pumping out enough cards in your hand to where you're dealing progression, but you should make the pros and cons and the calculation of like, is it worth playing this one attack card from my hand to make this amount of damage? Because in this situation, I probably wouldn't play Detroit Smash again. Because Detroit Smash in this situation becomes an 8 diff, and if I check a 3, I have to commit 5. So what I would do is, if I needed more damage, I would just play Texas Smash. You know, check, needed a 6, commit, do all the damage, and they take the chip, so that makes it easier for me to kill them later in the game. So they took all that damage. But even though I can keep pumping out damage and pushing into my opponent, I'm not going to do that. Why am I not going to do that? It is because it does not make sense for me to commit out all my foundations if it is not going to kill. If it is not going to kill, you do not commit. You do not commit all your foundations if it's not going to kill your opponent. So at this specific time, you just end your turn, you block, you play defensive, and you just wait till the next turn to where it's like, can you make a turn where you're like pushing again? Because again, even though we didn't kill our opponent, we did make progression, and that's what you want. You don't have to be killing your opponent like every turn to feel like you got something out of it. Sometimes it's like getting a little bit of damage and then working your way down. You know, Rome was not built in a day. Rome was not built in a night. So you just have to be able to understand that, you know, there is a point where you just pump the brakes and stop attacking. And that's how you, you know, that's how you play very competitively. So let's see what we went over. We went over priority of playing foundations, which, you know, to summarize that, I know we went to a lot of different topics. Priority of playing foundations, it's really about playing your key pieces or defensive foundations first. I think that, you know, it's really playstyle, honestly. If you're an aggro player and you have an aggro deck, I guess the priority for you being an aggro player is to play the offensive foundation and being like, all right, on my next turn I get +3 damage on my first attack. Yay. You know? But if you're like me, where you're a defensive player and you want to tell your opponent, like, no, you can't do that, then you want to play the defensive foundations first. So it's really all about playstyle, but generally what I would like to teach everyone is, you know, build the defensive foundation first, because that's how you're not going to die. So always prioritize those. Keep in mind of the curve. You know, we talked about 3s and 5s on top of the deck. The worst case you can check is a 3. The best case is a 5. That whole fishbowl, we talked about when to not attack. So we got that out of the way. And then there's creative ways to get out of death, which is the next thing I'm going to talk about. And I wish I made a video about this, but I don't know how many of you have watched my top 4 game against Tamron Cardwell, which shout outs to Tamron Cardwell, great card game player, great human being, very nice guy. So when I was playing against him, I made a very grave play mistake that costed me the game in multiple occasions. It was that one moment that I need to go back and make commentary over, because I don't think a lot of people saw what was going on, but I really shot myself in the foot in top 4. And that's one of the things that we're talking about next, is which is creative ways to get out of death. And you know, I had my shot against Tamarind Cardwell, but I let it fall through. So I'm gonna try and set up the situation. Let's go back to the table cam. And actually, this is probably a good break point to where I can catch up with the chat. So Phil in Blue, how you doing? Thank you for coming out tonight. Was considering removing self-sacrifice from my Sui deck, but now considering swapping for Observant to keep the low blocks. Yeah, low blocks are kind of important. I could see an argument for self-sacrifice or Observant. Like they're both solid, but if it was me, I'd probably do a combination of both. You can do a combination of both, like, I don't know, 2 and 2, 1 and 1. Something like that. Because Observant Student, you get to look at the top card of your deck, but unless you can do something with that card, it doesn't really mean much. But the reason why you would play Observant Student over Self-Sacrifice is because it's a flip. So that means that you have a card that you can feed into Frog Lashing. So that's one reason. The other reason you would run Self-Sacrifice over Observant is you get +1 damage or -1 damage, which can make or break games. So they have their uses. It depends on which way you want to go. And generally, if you can't go one way, you go both ways. Phil in Blue says, I have a tough time deciding when to roll or do chip with Asui. Once it starts rolling, I tend to forget stopping is an option. Yeah. A lot of people forget that, and it's hard. I'll be honest. Like, I make it sound easy, and I talk about it, but it's not easy. Like, let me clear the air about that real quick. It is not easy to know when to stop attacking. I can 100% relate to everyone here on that level. It isn't. I talk about it, but I talk about it because it exists, but it's not an easy thing to do. And why is it not easy? Let's talk about why it's not easy. The reason why it's not easy to know when to stop attacking is because you don't know when was it enough to be like, I played 2 attacks and I got my 4 damage in. Was that enough? Because sometimes you're like, man, I got my 4 damage in. I could get another 7 damage if I just play another attack. But there has to be like another side of you. And this is where I kind of look at it as like the angel on the shoulder and the devil on the shoulder. Okay? The angel's like, yo, quit attacking. You know, build up some defense. But the devil's like, yo, screw this guy up. Put some more damage on board. And they have their pros and cons. Neither the angel or the devil is right. It's you. It's you, the player, that makes that call. And that's where you live and die with your decision. As crazy as it sounds, that's how I look at it. You know, I hate to make it sound like there's so much importance on it, but that's how I usually feel when I'm playing MHA. And it's fun, you know. My suggestion is the only way you get better into knowing what is best for you is practice. Do it both ways, you know. Play the attack. Cool. Did you win? Great. Did you lose because of that? Okay, well, you know, keep a mental note. And then the next time, don't play the attack. See what happens. Use your games and your experience as a reference point for your playstyle to be like, okay, this worked out for me that one time, so I'm gonna do it again. Okay, this didn't work out for me, so I'm going to do the opposite way and see what happens. That's what you should be doing in those situations where you're like, when do I stop attacking? But also keep in mind that if you do attack it and it gets blocked, you just lost a potential block for your next turn. So there is such a thing as running into brick walls in this game. Yep. Prars. There was a person that I knew, I think it was like Prars Guide. Is that the same Prars? It might be two Prars, I don't know. But welcome Prars. Regardless which Prars you are. But yeah, I agree with your statement about the self-sacrifice and such. Observant. Phil and Blue says, I've lost games off of 1 damage and remember I could have attacked once. Yeah. That happens a lot, and I don't think about it now, but after I lost in top 4, I was probably thinking about why did I lose for the next 2 days. And you know, it's not like I'm going day to day and I'm like, man, why did I lose? And I don't know about it. It's like, why did I lose? And I'm thinking about the mistakes that I made and the situations I was in and the choices that I could have made to win the top 4. And they're there. You know, I can go back and show you what was all happening, all the numbers, the variables, all the cards on the field, and like my thought process and like Tam's thought process. I can show you. And it was a crazy game. But yeah, let's see. I might run to self-sacrifice. I need it for games to get drawn out, but I find holding it space when I'm able to turn to kill. Alright, let's get back into what were we doing? Give me a sec. We were talking about creative ways to get out of death. That's what it was. And then I was talking about top 4. That's right. So let's put it out there. So I was playing Kiroshima. This is my Eraserhead build. That's fine. That's why I pulled out my Kiroshima deck, because I knew we were going to talk about this. Creative ways to get out of death, and the best example point I can think of is when I lost to Tam in the top 4. This is not the exact it's not the exact scenario, but it's like a similar scenario. And this makes me mad just thinking about it, honestly. I don't think about it anymore, but like, man, it's a frustrating situation once you see this. If you're on this side of the table with Kiroshima, it feels bad. It does. So this is a similar situation to the top 4 scenario when I was playing against Cameron Cardwell. And I had just finished attacking into Tam. I couldn't kill him. So I pumped the brakes. And did I pump the brakes? I think I did. I pumped the brakes enough. And I had a defensive turn. but there was like, he played a flash attack. Was it flash? I don't remember. He played some attacks and I decided to, oh, it was the throws. That's what it was. I didn't want to block the throws because they were guaranteed chip damage. So I just reduced the damage on the throws. Because if you reduce the damage on the throws, it's the same thing as blocking them. Because I'll give you an example. He played zero gravity lift, which was the throw. If you block a zero gravity lift, you take what? 3 damage if you block it? Because you take half because it's a throw. But if you use Kiroshima's ability and you pick up a foundation and you're like -2 damage, you took 4. So when you do things like that, instead of blocking the attack, you just reduce the damage on it. Reducing the damage on it is the same effect as blocking the attack, except you didn't have to block. So you get to keep a card in your hand to block later on. And you also don't build up on progressive difficulty, and you don't commit cards to try to block. Like, there's a lot of reasons why I took the zero gravity lifts at face damage and I didn't block them. It's because for that exact reason. So going into it more, I ended up picking up a low block, which was what caused me to get into a more awkward situation, which there's actually a lot more awkward stuff that I could show you, but I'll mention it briefly here. The game 3 between me and Tam sucked because I saw all of my coordinated efforts within the first 3 turns, which is really bad because it's a unique foundation. And when you have them in your hand, like, what do you do with 3 other coordinated efforts when you already have 1 built, right? And all of my plus ultras were at the bottom of my deck. So I could not use Night Watch at all. I had Night Watch on the field, but I had 0 plus ultras in the grave because all of my plus ultras were in the bottom side of my deck. So my deck in the top 4 game against Tamron Cardwell was extremely screwed up because my deck was shuffled badly by me, and I was in a situation for failure because I had cards in my hand that I couldn't use effectively, and I had dead cards on my field, and the cards in my deck were clogged. They were all in the same spot. And Tamron Cardwell even asked me this on the turn that he killed me. He was like, do you have any action cards in your discard pile? I'm like, no. So he just went off. And when by off, I mean like killing me. However, here's the thing that I really messed up on. And it goes into math and some really tight math. So he plays Meteor Shower, and Meteor Shower has this way of saying, like, if you have momentum, you can discard a card to pick up the Meteor Shower from your hand, blah blah blah. And in Tam's graveyard, he didn't have any Meteor Showers until he started using his foundations to draw into Meteor Showers and then also pitch them into the discard pile. So my math was, I was constantly looking at my Fulfilled My Duty, which was my sideboard card, and this card was in my sideboard for the exact situation that I lost to Tamron Cardwell, where I could have like stopped Tamron from killing me. This is essentially another Night Watch where I'm like, let's end the enhanced step. And I had this on board. But the reason why I didn't fire off this ability was because Tamron was not in a good situation either. He was not in a good situation where he could manipulate to where he would have enough attacks to kill me. So Tam was in the situation where he couldn't kill me. But I was in the situation of trying to figure out how do I minimize the damage as much as possible. So as I was thinking, Tam was also thinking. Tam was also looking how I was thinking because he was looking at how I was interacting with my own cards. So he was trying to read, what is Tony 2 thinking about at this exact moment? And the thing that sucks about it is he got to see what I was thinking about, and he was like, oh, now I know Tony doesn't have any action cards, because he probably thought that Night Watch was active the whole time. But because I was looking at my discard pile so much, and because I was like taking like seconds to try and figure out my plays, he was like, why is Tony thinking so hard right now? Why is he thinking so hard right now when all he has to do is this, this, and this? And time had passed so much that Tam was like, oh, there's a chance that Tony doesn't have any action cards in his discard pile. So he asked me, he's like, you got any action cards in your discard pile? I'm like, no, I don't. So that put him in the situation where he started using enhances on his field. He was like, okay, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use latent skill, discard 2 cards, and draw 2 cards. So the thing that sucks about it is the moment he did that, the moment he used latent skill, he discarded a meteor shower, and he drew another attack from his deck to his hand, and he had 1 momentum. So he needed 2 attacks to kill me, and he only had 1. He only had 1 attack card in his hand to kill me. But he turned that 1 attack into 2 attacks, and this is how he did it. Okay, and just pretend these are meteor showers. At the moment that he asked me if I had any action cards in my discard pile, I told him no, I don't, and it was during my enhanced step. So what I could have done is, as soon as he asked me that, I could have been like, fulfilled my duty in the enhanced step, and I would have been fine. I would have blocked, I would have not died. But what ended up happening was, he asked me that, and he made a play that I didn't see that he could do. Like, it was there. Like, the play was on the field. He showed me earlier that turn that he had the meteor shower in his hand. But because I'm unfamiliar with Ochako, and because I've never seen the play that he did to me this turn, I didn't stop myself to really recognize it as a threat. But once it happened, I was just like, damn, I lost the game. So this is what he did. He used latent skill. He only had 1 attack in hand, and he needed 2 attacks to kill me. He flipped latent skill because I passed. Discarded 2, drew 2 cards, drew 1 attack, and he activated Meteor Shower to discard a momentum, to pick up Meteor Shower and discard a card from his hand, and now he has 2 attacks. That's exactly what happened when I was playing against Tamara Cardwell in the top 4 of the PPG 1K. And I lost because of that. And it sucks. It burns me. I don't think about it like in a bad way. I think about it in a way it's like, I want to get better. You know, it sucks that it happened, but the only way you can go is up from here on out, right? So you just got to take your L's. And Tam's a great person. I'm glad, you know, we got to play the game we did. I think he, you know, was a good player and all that good stuff, you know. And after that game, we really got to, I don't know, got to connect. So that was cool. In any case, yeah, I sideboarded this card and I didn't even use it. But on defense, the reason why I'm highlighting this top 4 moment is because I sideboarded in this card, and this was the one creative way that I could have used to stop Tamarin from killing me, is by ending the enhanced step so that way he couldn't pick up another attack, and so that he was forced to play the Meteor Shower in his hand, and he would not have the second attack to kill me. So yeah, the way you creatively stop your opponent from killing you is you want to sideboard in cards that take away your opponent's options, and that's what Fulfilled My Duty does. Is it removes options from your opponent, and cards that have like seal abilities, cards that cancel enhances, cards that stop the enhance phase, cards that I don't know, reduce damage, like all these types of different ways to interact with your opponent exist in My Hero, and you should be playing them, playing those cards in your deck, so that way you can interact with your opponent and find creative ways to stop your opponent's game plan. That's the whole point I'm trying to make. You also could have drawn 2 foundations. I asked him specifically, Sam. I asked him, like, what did he draw? So in that exact scenario, I really shot myself in the foot. Excuse me. But yeah, I asked him what happened, and he told me, and I was just like, oh, whatever. You know? But yeah, always look for, like, key pieces, because he had the latent skill. That's what you should be doing. He had the latent skill in hand, on the field, and he had already telegraphed and shown that he had a meteor shower in his hand. So had I put 2 and 2 together to see what his game plan was and how he could kill me that turn, if I had saw that, I could have been like, all right, fulfill my duty. You don't get to do any of that. But alternatively, there are cards out there like Irrefutable Force of Nature. If this was an Irrefutable Force of Nature, I could be like, remove Irrefutable Force of Nature, seal latent skill, and then Tam would still be stuck in the same situation. And that is a game-winning move. So what are creative ways to get you out of death is looking at all the pieces that your opponent has to be able to kill you, and putting cards in your deck, either the main board or the sideboard, that take away options from your opponent. Because once you take the pieces away from them, taking away the pawns, the rooks, the bishops, their chess pieces, once you take those pieces away from them, they can't kill you anymore. They can't hurt you. And that's why defensive cards are so important. Phil and Boo says, I lost a match last night because I checked 6 oranges in a row on a chain. That happens. And it just sucks. I usually, those games, I don't take those games as data, because I just think about it as like, I should have shuffled better. You can only sideboard after the first round, right? After the first game. Yeah. After the first game, then you can start sideboarding. Alright, what's else on the docket? Let's look. So we talked about creative ways to get out of death. That's cards that interact, like seal, ending the enhanced step, cancels. Looking for signs that your opponent has your death on board. We talked about that. You have to look at, what's available to your opponent on the field. And really, it's all math. Like, you have to understand that when I was sitting in top 4 and I was sitting in that last turn that Tam killed me in our 3rd game, I knew exactly what he needed to kill me, and I knew that he didn't have it in his hand. And I was just trying to overthink and blah blah blah. And I oversighted seeing the latent skill and how that latent skill interacts with Meteor Shower. So that sucked. But yeah, just put yourself in the mindset of your opponent. Like, look at their deck, read their cards that they're using. Try to think about how does your opponent generate like another attack, because that's usually what it is. It's either they generate more damage or they generate new attacks in their hand. And in the case that I lost to Tam, he was able to generate more attacks in his hand. And it was short-sighted of me to not take those options away from him when I could have. And then we talked about stopping your opponent from killing you with an enhance or ability. So that goes back into like the playing counter cards, you know, seal, cancels, and the enhance step. Sometimes it's like +3 or -3 damage. And I think that hits all of our key points on defense. Irrefutable has to be uncommitted to use the seal or move, right? Correct. It does not say playable while committed. So you cannot use it while it's committed. Alright, well, that was a good stream. I hope I helped, you know, anybody that stopped by in any type of way. I am trying to get more, you know, a bigger audience, so that way I can share competitive stuff like I used to do in Teppen. And that's my goal. That's what we're doing. So you should be seeing more posts from me, you know, from here on out. But thank you all for stopping by. This is it. This is the stream, the defense stream. I think this was such a good stream that I'm actually going to, once 24 hours has passed, I'm going to archive this specific stream to YouTube, because there are so many topics that we hit, and I think that we were able to do it in a very efficient manner. So it was awesome. But yeah, you all have a good night. Thank you for, you know, being here with me. You know, being a part of doing something that I felt needed to be out there, needed to be said. And yeah, really, I'm very gracious. Thank you. And have a good night. You know, I'm hoping for good things for everyone here. And just continue being you, being happy, being comfortable with you. Yeah, no problem. Y'all have a good night.